Hello there, welcome back to Celtic World Order podcast. As always, I'm Stevo Matt, and as we always say, it's a warm welcome yourself. Thanks for joining us back here on the channel. It's going to be a transfer rumour roundup. There's been many flying about over the last week, and rather than just drip and drab them out, we've just pulled them all together. I've got Paul D on screen, mate. We're going to talk about them, give you our thoughts on what we think about it. Is it what we need at this moment in time? Is it literally just rumours? Is it agents trying to up their players' stock? Who knows? But either way, there's a good few to talk about. It's always nice, particularly this early in the season, Paul, when it's starting after the season finishes, you get that wee lull and you're desperate to talk about something. However, yep, it's been positive because there's some stuff to talk about, mate. You're looking forward to getting about all this speculation on for now, all the way through the rest of the summer, of course.
Yes, mate. Aye. Thanks for getting me back on. Yeah, absolutely. The season did finish on a wee bit of a lull after that cup performance, but there's plenty to talk about. And despite the fact with a very successful season, we've got that wee bit of a wee jolt now that we need to recover from and progress on to next season.
That's the thing. I think when we looked at the way the season, finished up, we sat here and maybe a wee bit philosophical. I guess that's easy to do after the event, but the reality is if we're being totally honest, the takeaway from it when we graded that season was work still to be done. Now, of course, the one thing that we're always shouting out for is get the work started early. We now know our fate. We're going to be seeded in the Champions League draw. We'll face one playoff, two-legged game to try and get ourselves through, whereas our other city rivals have many unseeded pathways to go through, and hopefully that falls out because we all remember it's all shiny and bright over there. However, £20 million is supposedly the big war chest that we're going to get. I fully expect, Paul, Celtic to be spending that and then some this summer to strengthen, and hopefully maybe some of these names that were thrown out there could fit into the equation. I'm looking forward to getting in about it. We've got a couple of defenders, we've got a couple of attacking players, and I think on face value, Paul, that's exactly what the doctor ordered. Tisdale, is he going to write you some prescriptions?
Aye, long overdue. The prescription notepad has been left empty for a wee bit too long. Obviously, January, you're never guaranteed getting quality and great additions in a January window, but even last summer there was still work to be done, and the squad was put into the season with that in mind. But I think looking at this season coming up and the players that we're linked with and the positions, more importantly, that we're going to talk about and we've been linked with are much needed.
Yep, absolutely. And as we say, let us know your thoughts. We're just going to give you our sort of unfiltered thoughts on what we think. A lot of these guys, I'm being perfectly honest, don't know too much about them. As ever, it's about going and finding out what can you get on these guys, dig up a wee bit of reports, dig up their stats. And yes, we say it all the time, stats only give you a wee tiny snapshot of it, but maybe it'll pique your interest. Let us know what you think of these names that were thrown out here. Does it sound like something you want? What do you think that Celtic need? Do you think that we'll make those big money signings? Do you expect any players to leave? Whatever your thoughts are, fire them down in the comments. It is a pre-recorded episode, so just bear that in mind. We'll not be able to reply to them as they come in. So just leave your generalised thoughts and we always try to get back to you. As we say as well, if you like what you're seeing here on the channel, goes without saying, give it a thumbs up. Most importantly, hit the subscribe button. Support the channel. It costs you absolutely nothing and it'll help us grow. And you can, of course, get us on our other socials. Links are below. X, Blue Sky, Spotify, TikTok, all that by now. And thanks for your continued support. So as we always say, Paul, let's get in about it. Let's get down to business. There's a few to cover now. Of course, the one thing a long time that we have been shouting out for after the maybe untimely, for some, predicted departure of Kyogo in January was we were crying out for that support striker. Now, we brought back Johnny Kenny, and I think it's fair to say, you much like yourself, has been pretty happy with what we've seen to Johnny Kenny, but undoubtedly we need another striker. The name that keeps coming round, and spoiler alert, we're not going to talk about him here, is of course big Christegard, and that's always been the sort of marquee. That's the one that we've all expected, but I think there's pretty much room for an additional striker, maybe I dare say it, a budget-friendly striker to add in there. Do you think Johnny Kenny is going to stick about first and foremost, and on top of, do you think is there room for Celtic to have 3-4 strikers on the books?
Well, at the rate that we're losing players out of our youth development system, then there's definitely space going to be freed up for players to come in. Johnny Kenny is very much a player who's come to us from a much lesser kind of level of league and has acquitted himself very well. when he went back to Shamrock on loan, the goals that he scored, a lot of them were left foot, right foot, headers, free kicks, etc. He looked very adept at that level.
A decent variety of goals, absolutely.
Aye, absolutely. So he's got his, goals for us now, got off the mark, very early days, a player with development in mind. Could he be put back out on loan? Very possible. But I think Rodgers does see something in him. So I would like to see him kind of still being with the club, if I'm honest. He shouldn't be relied on, as a secondary striker. The way that he has been at times, I think that there's, players that should come in maybe ahead of him. But he should definitely still be a Celtic player, all going well, with a route to development in mind. But yes, another kind of Kyogo style player I'd like to see coming in, if I'm honest. Another player that will really work with the system that we had with Kyogo, breaking the lines. A player that will come in and really terrorise defenders. That's what I want to see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We've obviously been playing Maeda through the middle to great success. And then obviously as we've tried to bring back Big Ida into the fold, we've moved out Maeda to the left. Now, no disrespect to Maeda, he's been rightly so player of the year and a house on fire through the middle. But I just felt that when we then transitioned him back out to that left wing, it just wasn't quite the same. So I'm really, really interested to see how the manager wants to play this one going through the summer and in the new the sort of new season. Does he have Maeda as being out there as a left winger option again? Does he revert back to that and then, as I says, buy another striker, maybe another two strikers, and have Kenny as the third choice with Maeda, someone who can adapt should you need it? Very, very interesting. Of course, there's a rumour mill about, will we keep on to Maeda? I think that's something that really we want to put the minds of the fans to rest sooner rather than later. Once that wee initial breaks happened and it's back to business, I would be hoping that he's someone that we tie in, because usually, as we say, a Celtic transfer window and windfall usually comes, and that's when the spending comes. I would like Celtic to be early and getting about it. And as we say, I think there's room for players. Definitely I'd like to keep around Johnny Kenny, but I do think that there's room for Celtic to have two additional strikers in the building, and top of Maeda and that option of Ida as well. Whether we do that or not is a different thing, and of course where the quality levels across the board is going to remain. We obviously remember the glorious times when you had, Larsson, Sutton and Hartson. It was a great combination three to have, and then of course you also had your sort of peripheral strikers, the wee bit more developmental ones as well, and around that. While we go full out, I think we really need to, and maybe this guy will fit the box. This is the first one. That's a report that came out from ESPN in Holland. So you all know ESPN, a very well-known, reputable outlet. Their Holland publication has 710,000 followers, and they're reporting on this chap. He's a 25-year-old Moroccan striker, Youssef El Kachati, and he plays in the second division at Holland, and it's Telstar. Don't know too much about them, but what I do know about him is that he's out of contract this summer. Now, that is something that is very, very interesting, and his manager has said as much that he's likely to leave, Paul. Now, one thing that Celtic have always been good at is speculating. They've been good at finding, unearthing wee gems. Now, the report from ESPN says that Celtic actually had scouts in the stand. So again, it's a reputable outlet. You've got to take that at face value. This isn't coming from the local papers. This isn't coming via an agent. This is a major, your equivalent of Sky Sports, if you will, saying that Celtic are casting an eye over this chap. Now, it would certainly be a nominal fee. You've got to imagine that would be around about 1.5, 2 million. It could potentially go over, depending on the interest in him, Paul. But similar to when we were talking about the likes of Sidibe, the midfielder from Guingamp, again in a situation where you're going to get it. Are we? Should we be looking at these kind of guys? And I'll give you stats, but I just want your initial thoughts on them. Yes, we want to go out. We want to sign marquee or big development, exciting players and spend multiple millions. But sometimes what's on your doorstep, going for free with a decent record, is not to be sniffed at. I'd rather punt on something maybe like this than just plucking somebody out of complete obscurity, say, as we have from the likes of the Korean League and stuff.
Well, this is it. I don't know about anybody else, but I am all done with protracted striker links and sagas. We now need to be decisive. We need to be agile, and whether maybe this is what the doctor has been doing behind the scenes. Maybe this is what we're going to see, the fruits of his prescriptions, and we're going to see, players being brought in that he has been maybe spending the whole of last season cultivating, scouting, sending people out to watch. I know very, very little about this boy. We're going to go through his stats, but at the end of the day, if it's low budget, it's low risk, risk reward and all the rest of it. But when you look at it, we have got money to spend. We've just got money back there from the wee man signing for Liverpool.
Jeremy Frimpong, exactly. Rangers getting 20 million and we're getting what? Best bet a quarter or more of that for doing nothing.
We've not even had to get out of bed. So we will have money to spend. And the moonbeams, and we're going to discuss that from across the other side of the city. If anything, it'll just keep us, more agile and busy in this busy market. But this boy, low value in terms of what we should be. People will be thinking about spending big bucks. If there's been work done and he's been scouted properly, and it's not get much risk attached to it, then go for it.
Well, I mean, in terms of his actual profile, to have a wee bit of a look at him in profile, he's had 190 senior appearances, during which he scored 83 goals and he's had 20 assists. Now, he is 25, so he's not exactly young. He's not over the hill by any means, so he's well seasoned. But again, maybe in similar, and I know Johnny Kenny is a bit younger, but playing in a sort of different standard now. Again, I don't know too much about Dutch football out with the Eredivisie, the main Premier Division, if you will. I don't really know what the standard of the drop down of the second division is, but certainly the guy's numbers aren't to be sniffed at. This season alone, he's been a mainstay, 44 games, 24 goals and 6 assists. So he's had 30 goal contributions for them this season alone. Not so much in last season, 22 games, half the game time, 6 goals and 3 assists. But then the season prior to that, I don't really know the ins and outs of his middle season there, but he had 25 games, 24 goals and 2 assists. So you look over that 3-season period, mate, pretty steady numbers. Adams is he's 25, so he's well-rounded. He hasn't really got much to write home about in terms of international experience or indeed European experience, and I know that's always put heavy on a Celtic signing. 1 Moroccan unders that's all he's got to show for it. How much that's got to do with the quality of the rest of their international squad, or indeed maybe the level he's playing at. But one thing that you got to say from there is he is performing well at his level.
Yeah, as you say, mate, I don't have much knowledge of anything within the main Eredivisie. Other than that, like the big teams that you see now and again, I don't go into it in any great depth. But the numbers are not, they're not too bad numbers in terms of a striker that would be an SPL striker. So
yeah.
What we're talking about there is pretty good numbers.
And I think the way you've got to look at it, when you're considering these sort of guys for sort of peripheral teams, peripheral leagues dropping down, there's always that perception that you drop down a league, you drop down quality. Now, I know that we've been stung. We've had the likes of your Amido Baldes, we've had your, dare I say it, your Mo Banguras and the likes of that. So, we've had some absolute dross. We've had some absolute dross, and I can understand the apprehension, perhaps. But again, I think that there's room to take a gamble and a punt on these guys. For me, if you're getting them for a nominal fee, I may be wrong on this one. However, I don't know what the guys' options are going to be like, but certainly when you look at Celtic, who can offer you, a successful team who have been winning season upon season, that European potential, known as well that if you go to Celtic, you perform well, that you can kick on, you can get into international recognition. I mean, think back to guys like Yakimakis. He was something about a journeyman, of a journeyman, and he came to Celtic. Yes, I know since he's left, he's maybe not kicked on, but he had that massive purple patch, he had that shot in the arm, it catapulted him into international, it got him big moves. And if you're a guy like him, you've got to imagine that Celtic are going to be, if you have options, are going to be easily up there as your best option, one of the top 2 or 3 at least, easily. And again, for me, I don't mind looking at these kind of guys, assuming you pay them at the right amount. Now, in previous seasons, when we went for guys like Bangura and Rasmussen and stuff, I felt we paid too much for guys because we bought them out of contracts. Different story with a guy that's on a free, though.
That's it. Yeah, he probably will have other offers on the table. Again, whether these links that we are going to discuss are, solid links, or is it agents that are, pimping their players out to various different outlets and different clubs and trying to generate interest, we don't know. you know, but at the end of the day, I mean, what team was it that Giakoumakis came to us? Was that no a bottom end of the Eredivisie?
It was. I think, if I do recall, they were near enough relegation fodder. Now, of course, he had a decent return. He was their top goal scorer. He had a lot of penalties. It's irrelevant. You've got to score the goals, of course. But yeah, he came over to us from a sort of mid to lower Eredivisie team that were really, really struggling. He was the glowing light for them. But yeah, there he goes. It's proof that you can not always judge a guy by their cover. But I think the important thing for us is, I don't mind, as I say, looking at guys like this, so long as they are a contingency or another option. If you told me this is who Celtic were chasing and there was no other names in the equation, I would be a little bit up and a bit angry. But as a supplementary option that could be low cost, as you say, potentially low risk as well.
Right. Yep. There's nothing really in terms of risk, you know, with the valuation that we've got there. The only thing is, every time that we seem to get round a table and talk to players, these numbers go up and up and up, or clubs or agents.
Of course.
You know, a la Ida and various other deals where.
But as we say, is the out of contract thing plays in your hands.
That's a big, that's a whole deal breaker, a deal clincher rather, that would work in our favour. So yeah, for that money, if that money stays accurate, then I would say have a look at him. Seriously, I will be doing that. I'm going away and have a look at YouTube now.
Oh, don't listen, don't trust YouTube, by the way, because I thought Bangura was a world day, all right? So.
Marco Tellio was,
Oh, we'll get on to him, don't you worry. We'll get on to him near the tail end. Yeah. But yeah, so from strikers to defenders, I think that's been the big question. Of course, the saga of the summer is going to be the Willie, won't he? Is it going to be Greg Taylor sticking about? And the more this one gets protracted, the more I think it's written that he's just going to part ways. So much so, as we discussed last week there, the Celtic are revisiting the idea of keeping hold of Jeffrey Schlupp. Now, again, I'm at odds with this one. I don't want to talk about Jeffrey Schlupp. I just want to talk about him in passing. I am at odds with him. I can see the experience. I can see what he brought. I thought he had a good start, and I thought he very quickly faded away. Now, it fits the lazy bill of when no Kieran Tierney's come back. Kieran Tierney is bona fide. He come back, sign it's happening. That is your number one choice on paper all day long. We need support for that. We need someone else to come in and assist there. And I think arguably, much like I just says with the striking option there, I want to see Celtic have a good 1-2 and also a third option, because for the longest period, we were essentially just running off Greg Taylor and then moving people about there. Aye. So left back's huge for us, Paul.
It's unacceptable, and I use that word in all seriousness, that we had that situation where we were literally almost, you know, despite the league success and everything else, towards the tail end of that season, it was, and there was injuries and other things you need to consider, but having to just shoehorn players into different positions. Schlupp came in and gave us, you know, a wee bit of a bit of variation and a wee bit of a flexibility in terms of where he was supposed to be able to play. But as you say, it kind of slipped away. We've discussed them earlier on. But the bar needs to be higher in terms of who we're bringing in.
I mean, just to quickly gloss over Schlupp, where are you at in terms of, again, for me, it all comes down to the value. He's a free agent. Now, I'm sure that he'll have decent, maybe from the MLS, maybe from over in Saudi Arabia. We know this, right? I guess it would speak to how serious he is about wanting to play football. And by play football, I mean play football at a competitive level, i.e. looking at the Champions League and looking at adding to the medals, that up to that point, there was not a lot to write home about as far as if you're Jeffrey Schlupp for achievements. So for me, as I say, as much as I was kind of happy to see the back off him near the tail end of the season, if it's reasonable, I think he's a decent option to have, because you can shift them about and he can play different positions. But I do want Celtic. I don't want him to be the default fallback, Kieran Tierney plus Jeffrey Schlupp. I think Celtic need to forward plan on this one.
100%. I still have slight worries, if I'm being really honest. I'm going to absolutely adore having Kieran back in the building, but I do have slight apprehensions about his fitness. Now, I know he's played more than his fair share of games for Arsenal, and he's played brilliantly. I hope we just continue that for him and we can get more out of him and keep him playing regularly. But we definitely need to have a player at the same level as him, or the one that can go above the level that he gives us in terms of being able to come in and out the team if Kieran doesn't make it for
Well, I mean, I've got two names here to throw at you. Now, the first, we have had great success with some Japanese signings, you well know, and this is the first one here. This is a young Keita Kazuki, 19-year-old Japanese left back. He's currently playing the Swedish league at Djurgården. Now, this is a report that's come via Japanese media as well. This is Sponichi Soccer are reporting, and again, having a look at their profile, fairly reputable. They've got around about 17,500 followers on there now. He is currently, as I say, at Djurgården in the Swedish league, and quite a young talent. He's one of these guys who's burst onto the scene, and of course with that will come a fee. Now, having a look at his profile, there's not too much to write home about him as, but the interesting thing is they are also saying, and this could be the kicker, because dun dun dun, big names kicking in here that supposedly, I use the term supposedly, everything during the summer, pinch of salt and all that kind of stuff. PSG, the new Champions League winners, of course, and Atalanta are supposedly, I say it again, supposedly also sniffing around this young chap. Now, the estimated market value, and based on his very small sample size, is around about £3 million. However, unlikely to make Djurgården part ways with him, you are looking at them wanting anywhere between £5 to £6 million. So what does that get you, Paul? A very, very small sample size. He's been at them pretty much all his senior career, a mere 44 career appearances, 5 goals, 2 assists, but importantly for us, 11 games in the Europa Conference League. Again, I hate putting to anybody these guys where we don't have much to write home or talk about. But again, one that's come out of left field, and if Celtic are keeping tabs on young Japanese talent, from what we've done before, whether we've got irons in the fire, people in the know that we've behind the scenes not known about, that we're keeping tabs on them, this could also fall into that Arne Engels thing. Think back to when we spoke about his very limited sample size and the potential for him to grow. And again, if you've got teams like Atalanta and PSG looking at you, then it would suggest that there's something about you. In terms of that, as a developmental, very small sample size, I say, is this the kind of route that Celtic need to be going down? £5 to £6 million for a guy that's 19 that could have untapped potential, playing in an, I would say, comparable league to what we're doing. Obviously get the Conference League stuff behind them, Paul. But again, where are you at with making a sign like that? Because that's very much a developmental signing, looking long term, is it not?
Seems a lot for a 19-year-old, if I'm being really honest. His numbers with obviously the domestic form, you can't really look into that very much, but certainly the Europa stuff is encouraging. If there's teams like Atalanta who seem to be constantly looking at players that we're looking at involved in PSG, then if that is legitimate, then he's clearly got something about him. So that would dictate that the price will go up. With that, £5-6 million for a 19-year-old, if we've done a lot of homework on him and we're serious about it, you're going to have to obviously probably pay that or more. Atalanta and PSG will blow money like that out of the water.
What would Celtic's advantages, if any, approaching these young guys? Now, certainly for me, I'll always say that if you are good enough, you will play. Now, we can argue the toss about a very raw Jeremy Frimpong, who we mentioned earlier in the show there, who we snapped up for Man City. He was there as a developmental player. He got his chance. He seized it. He never looked back. And then he went over to Leverkusen and cemented a place. And by God, he's kicked on, found himself at Liverpool. So there's nothing to say that a guy like Kazuki Keita here couldn't do that. That he couldn't kick on and be that guy. And at $5 and $6 million, as I said, maybe with Engels, if you are interested, if you see something, you've got to take it, because a season down the line it might not be. But in terms of what the Celtic have to offer, no disrespect to PSG or Atalanta, but you've got to imagine that there would be more opportunity at a team like Celtic, whereas we go to these big teams, generally speaking, they buy up the brightest and youngest talent and they just filter them into their youth squad, maybe loan them out and hope that they come good, or that they can flip them for profit.
That's the frustration with the modern game, isn't it? You think about it through eyes of a supporter or somebody that's played the game to an extent, and you think, well, this is a better option for you. You would like to think that advisors will be saying that to players, but in the cold light of day, as we've seen with some of our developmental players, they get either turned by, clubs or, tapped up or whatever goes on, and it's just tunnel vision, right, drop everything and go. You're not going to get a game, you're probably going to be farmed out by that club or whatever. That's a frustration. But no, with this type of deal for this boy, I would imagine there might be more than that interest. If he's that good in PSG and Atalanta are interested now, then I would imagine other clubs will join the suitors list.
And I hate to say it, but to throw it out there, with the successes of Maeda, Kyogo, Kachati, you're a young Japanese player.
Aye, international.
With that experience, we known that, they know where those guys' trajectories have taken them, then, it's got to be give you food for thought, isn't it?
Maybe it's, I just think, maybe I've been manager mode on FIFA too long, but I sometimes think, well, maybe there's stuff that's been left behind, and people have been blowing the dust off it and thought, wait a minute, we've got all these, Japanese targets. Who knows? Maybe it's a player that, there was a boy that was down south way, was it Brighton? And Ange came out quite openly and said that he was one that he was looking at before Kyogo. Stuff like that. There may well have been targets from the Japanese players around the world that we don't know about, and this could be something like that. But no, I'm all for Celtic continuing their kind of marketing strategy in terms of the brand, and obviously bringing players like Maeda, who, let's be honest, none of us had heard of. Kyogo, maybe some of us had heard of. The Japanese players that we're now seeing, at Liverpool and various other clubs, the market there, Korean players, we've tapped into it before, and it's something that's quite encouraging, and it's obviously there's a strategy behind it from the club, but if we can still continue to unearth the talent from the Japanese market that we have, I know there's been a couple of players that maybe haven't quite hit the heights.
Of course.
Overall, I think we've been, really fortunate with the Japanese players.
Well, it seems that youth is on the cards in terms, and again, I don't want to, it's a side, I don't want to get on that side track there. Youth appears to be on the agenda, if the rumours are to believe, because I've just thrown out a 19-year-old Japanese left back. I've also got another one for you who is 19-year-old and he's English. And this is another interesting one, because this is another guy who's out of contract at the end of this month, and it would be a cross-border developmental fee. Think the way we did that with Dembele. And this is Harley Mills. He's 19. He's playing in League One at Peterborough. Now, again, a fairly small sample size. He's a young guy that's burst onto the scene this season, 24-25, a mere 17 appearances, 2 goals and 2 assists, with his overall tally for his time since the 23-24 season. So as it says, just burst onto the scene for Peterborough. 20 appearances and the 2 goals and 2 assists, which of course, as I just said, came in this season. Now, what's interesting here is he's out of contract. Fulham, I believe, offered £1 million. They would have to pay a fee because they are, still down in England. You don't get that cross-border sort of discount, so to speak. The £1 million fee was thrown out. Now, of course, this is the thing. The guy's out of contracts. He's open to speak to folk. And another interesting thing here is one of his big standout performances came in a Football League, a cup final, against none other than Chris Davies' Birmingham. So, as you well know, Mr. Davies, Mr. Rodgers, well acquainted, and of course, you wonder as he asked to run the eye over this guy. Now, as I says, youth's on the agenda. That's 2 guys, 2 different 19-year-olds, one from far over, in Europe, one on our doorstep. Now, of course, looking at the Mills one here, we talk about Tisdale, the football doctor. If there's any truth in this one, this is surely what we've been paying this guy to do. To have a look around the leagues. That was supposedly his specialism, identifying young talent, exciting talent that we could get up, and of course, tap into who's coming up and who's available when. Again, it's developmental. Kieran Tierney is going to be our number 1. We've talked about keeping around Jeffrey Schlupp, but a young 19-year-old, bringing him in, is it a good idea if he's got anything about him? Or are you frustrated that we're looking at such young talents when our own guys don't get a chance?
It's kind of 50-50 with me, because you want to see us plucking some gems from all over the world, but from down south, some of these clubs are chucking over really good, talented young players, and you want to see us being able to just get a kind of march on other teams like we've done before with the City Group connections and Frimpong and other, he had other options, but for his benefit chose us, and look where it's went. Other players, again, as you say, could look at that and think, there's a pathway there. Working with Rodgers again, different players, maybe if Chris Davies has got a connection still and is maybe looking at players, then maybe that's something that he could pass on to Rodgers, and there is still that kind of link. But yeah, I mean, it's another one where he'll start talking to other clubs. What was the fee? Or
again, it would be a cross-border. It'd be a cross-border developmental fee. That's the important thing. That's something that we've been stung with. Remember, we're losing some of our best young talent for our academy. Or, again, supposed best young talent, and we're getting hit with cross-border developmental fees. It would be nice for us if there's something about this young chap for us to utilise that again, because we saw the success that we got with Dembele. So again, nominal fee, and if there's something about it, it's potentially low risk but good upshot.
The risk that we face if these links are concrete, you will have, and we've seen how impatient, and we've all been guilty of it at times, where the fans can literally just spit the dummy and say, no, how we no spending this, how we no spending that. There will be different targets, obviously, that evolve during the progression of the window. But, you have got these youth links, which is all very encouraging, but I think a lot of fans will start to question if we don't, weigh in with some bigger targets and some bigger fees and bigger players. I think some fans will get a wee bit tetchy with that.
I agree, because if you remember back the season when we brought in Luke Shaw, Luke O'Connell, all again young exciting talents that were on the periphery at bigger or sort of mid-level clubs down south. You're like, brilliant, get them in development. How many of them worked out? Didn't really, did it?
No, that's a wee bit of worry. But it's a fine line, because part of me is also contradicting what I'm saying. I think broadly I'm speaking for across the board with fans, and fans will want big names, especially with this, latest circus that's going on elsewhere, where, moonbeams are getting, shot out of everywhere about, Luka Modric is coming to Glasgow and various other things. So in response to things like that, I think, the fans the ante will be upped. Hugh Keevins has already had his say on it about how the gauntlet has been thrown down. Do you know what? If that's the way the media are portraying it, hopefully our board do up the ante and do start looking at bigger targets. But there is a space for youth development as well.
Well, Paul, I'm going to concern you with the next target, because guess what? Youth's on the cards again. Okay. Now, this one, I apologise in advance.
Right.
Phonetically write it or whatever in the comments below if I butcher it, okay? It's a Serbian centre-back, right-sided. Now, that's interesting because, of course, as we know, we've got Scales, we've got Trusty, we've got Norotsky, left-hand-sided players. We've only really got CCV. So would this be a potential backup for him? Would it be someone who you'd like to play alongside him? Who knows? Now, again, this is an alleged being the key word here, alleged bid had been early bid. Celtic try, get ahead of the competition. Supposedly, this came via everybody's favourite Celtic journal, lackey, whatever you want to call him, Stephen McGowan. Now, as we well know, when Stephen McGowan puts stuff out to print, chances are it's came from the club. Now, again, we can't say 100% that's the case, but this is what's been out here, that supposedly, allegedly, other terms are available. Celtic put in an undisclosed bid. The amount has not been put out to tender, but it was rejected at this moment in time, and it is for this young chap from Red Star, Velshko Milosavljevic. Unbelievable, Stevie. You have butchered that. Stevo has killed that, but we'll just call him Big Velshko, all right? The big man there, 17, so there you go. Youth is on the agenda. Red Star made his debut season 2021 to 22. The stats read so far 2,700 minutes this season, 32 appearances and 3 assists. No goals. Overall tally for him, 90 games, 8 goals, 3 assists, and just short of 7,500 minutes. Now, is it Europa Youth, the UEFA League, Youth Champions League, 2 seasons on the run. He's played for that with Red Star. And this season, he made the bench unused in the Champions League for them. Now, as I say, Celtic are apparently trying to get ahead of the competition. The fee that they're looking for is supposedly being the key word, circa £8 million, with interest from both Everton and Eintracht Frankfurt. He is on contract until June 2027. So with a good 2 years left, you can understand if he's one of their mainstays, they see great potential in him. He's getting his game. He's established himself. That's where the 8 million comes in, because they want to be thinking about getting money for such a young asset, but also they'll probably be looking at who's interested. The fact that they've bled him in, I think perhaps putting him on that bench for the Champions League was a wee value raiser. But again, it's 17. I'll say it again, Paul. If you're good enough to play, you're good enough to play.
Mm-hmm.
But people have been concerned about punts on Engels and punts on Ida.
Yeah.
How would an £8 million 17-year-old centre half serve up to the fan base?
First of all, if it's came from Mr. McGowan, I'm probably thinking a lot of people will probably agree that it's got a fair bit of accuracy and foundation. So, as you say, that may have came from sources at the club or whatever else, but he very rarely doesn't get things too wide of the mark. So there is probably something in this.
Mm-hmm.
The money that they are talking about, obviously Red Star are a historical club with a lot of history attached to them. I've never had any idea about this boy at all, especially at his young tender age. If there's other clubs that you've named as well that are sniffing about, then and if we've got in amongst that and we're looking seriously at it, I think the fee for this one comes into a bit of a concern in terms of for a 17-year-old.
I mean, that's the thing, Paul. It's, again, and I'll argue the toss as I did with Engels, as I did when we were looking at the young Japanese left back. If these guys have that potential, that upshot, the fee's the fee, because you are paying to get in there early and secure the goods. Because if they play another season, chances are you can't afford them. Yeah. So it is a fine balancing act, and this is where your scouting system, this is where your football doctor and all the behind the scenes sort of analytics and stuff really need to be dialed in. This summer for me is absolutely huge for Celtic now. As you say, the moonbeams are coming out across the city. Will they get better? I have went on record of saying, yes, I do think they can only get better. In terms of can they translate that to a sustained challenge, that remains to be seen. But you would be ignorant to say that in the head-to-heads, those margins have started to get a bit finer. I actually think if Rangers were better, it would be better for us.
Yes.
Because I think the close competition would keep our guys on track. They would keep us sharp. They keep us agile. They keep us pushing and make us play better more often. I think part of this season was down to there not being that competition. But that's a side note. But in terms of looking at a guy at 17 for £8 million, the argument would always come back to, could you get someone with a wee bit more experience, a wee bit more seasoned for the same money?
Aye, absolutely. What did we pay for the likes of, Juranovic? I think players like him that had a bit more experience, he was only, 5-6 million or something like that, am I right?
But I mean, do you think the cautionary tale is sorry to jump in, is maybe Narotsky? We paid about £6 million for him.
Yep.
Now, again, his numbers were slight and it was a small sample size, but in terms of relative experience, you thought £6 million we're paying that for him, and he said a topsy-turvy, uncertain thing. But then you also look £6 million on Trusty. Again, question marks there. So should we be concerned or thinking, well, I don't know about that guy 17 for that kind of money? Should we look beyond the age?
I know, and that's often the argument. Is it the system? Is it the player? Is it just bad luck? We've got all these kind of categories that we need to look at, and all these different kind of eventualities. You think when players come in and they're £4 or £5 million, which again in today's market is, toffee. It's nothing to us. It's a lot of money. Especially when you're talking about a player for 11 million and everything else, and 9 million, and the money that we've spent before. We have spent good money on players, and we have been, looking at, players that are obviously scouted and that they've got something about them. Whether it is just our system or our luck, I don't know. But yeah, that kind of money for a young player to come in would be pretty big. I don't see us doing that.
And it's big shoes to fill. Of course, again, Red Star, no matter what you think of them, they're always a team that are in and around on the European scene. Of course, whether it's Champions League, where's Europa League, they're there, and it will be a competitive league. And Red Star, much like we have very fanatic fans, extreme fans in some cases, where the expectancy level is huge. So perhaps, again, if I was to play the averages, you're thinking about mentality and what it takes. Again, if you're good enough, you're good enough. If you're staying in that side with their expectations, then you must be doing something right. Of course, can that translate to carrying perhaps a heavier shirt on your shoulders, just in terms of stature, rather than, well, of course, the fan expectation is going to be equaled, but I just mean in terms of club stature, raising that occasion.
Playing for a club like Red Star at that young age, and then getting the opportunity to play with, a team that have dominated their own league for the last, good number of years, would be a fantastic kind of step for that boy of that age. It just remains to be seen whether we would pay that kind of money for a player of that age, but we'll wait and see.
Well, that's the thing. We might have some people coming out, but we should be looking at, as I say, bright young talents. And if that's going to be the fee, I think the important thing is, I'll reiterate it again, this season's huge. Celtic need to get this right. And I think that, for me, I think if they've been scouted, if the rationale, if the evidence is there to support that this young chap is up to the mark, then I would say go for it. Of course I would. But I can also understand that maybe those type guys on the board with a wee bit of apprehension to think, well, your two biggest signings so far, they've gave good returns, but I don't know what they're expecting. What are the board expecting? Fans, I suppose, want their cake and eat it. They want to eat it as well. They want it to be, as I say, Engels to be the reincarnation of sort of Zidane, and Ida to be the next Maradona and all that stuff. It just doesn't happen. But I'm pretty sure that maybe quietly behind the scenes there'll be slight reservations, but how Celtic react and the type of player and the profile that they go for will tell you what the board's intentions are and how seriously they take this supposed challenge from the new revolution over at Ibrox. But yeah,
I'm hoping they take it very seriously in terms of what we've seen before. We've got the season tickets done, the financial figures that we posted at our last release were very encouraging, and as I say, we're getting money given to us for business deals that were very well produced in terms of forward sales for players like Frimpong. So,
and of course, as well, with the commercial aspects, so the new Adidas deal and all this kind of stuff. There's, I look forward to another 8 tops, 9 training ranges and jammies and slippers and everything getting brought out for Adidas next season. So time to bring some of that money back and put it on the field.
Overdue, I would say.
Well, something that you'll maybe take a wee bit of sort of comfort from is something a lot more predictable, something a bit more familiar. And that's, of course, this chap again. It is Michael Ange Balikwisha, the 24-year-old Belgian left winger. Again, a name that keeps coming up and up and up. Of course, as we know, perhaps we landed on our feet with the return of Jota. Balikwisha was the one on everybody's lips, and injury, quite severe injury, actually derailed that, diverted us away from it. Now, remember at the time, Paul, when we were talking about Balikwisha, the talk was up around about 9 million or so. That is severely changed. And again, like I've mentioned, with the out-of-contract players or the running low on the contract players, this is another one and a great opportunity for Celtic to potentially snap up. Now, he plays at Royal Antwerp, as we well know, but what's interesting, the news coming out from there is they find themselves in a position needing to balance the books. They need to sell players. They're going to be doing some downsizing of the squad. They're going to be letting some of the heavy hitters, heavy wage makers go off the bills. And the reports from their own sort of country and those in and around the club are that they are looking to raise circa 30 to 40 million euros from player sales, anywhere between 4 to 5 players. And Balikwisha, he falls into this because he only has 1 year left on his contract. The time is ticking down, and they want to cash in on Balikwisha. Now, for us, that could be, of course, a great thing because it's seen the peak value of 8, 9, anywhere up to 11, we heard at one point, plummet. And we're now in the regions of 5 to 6 million pounds. That, just on face value, is exactly the kind of opportunity that Celtic would want.
sounds like something that we would be in the driving seat because of how much has went into this before. The scouting has been done, the speculation has been done to death in terms of this player. So there can't be anybody else really if this player is, legitimate. And by all accounts, it's come up far too many times for it not to be legitimate.
Yeah.
The issue with the injury would be, what was the nature of his injury again?
Well, we shall get through to them, and that's obviously going to be the concern, as we say, with Balikwisha. And you always say it's a phrase you like to throw out, there's no smoke without fire. This one keeps on coming round, and I would be greatly surprised, particularly when we look at the situation with Jota, when we look at Kuhn kind of underperforming a wee bit, Yang not quite the full finished article yet. There's a need for us to get in one, maybe two wingers. Now, Balikwisha plays in the left wing, but he's adaptable. He can also move over like Forrest now, the right wing. Now, just to quickly remind ourselves of what he has done stat-wise, his overall balance since the 20-21 seasons, 182 appearances, 38 goals and 21 assists. So when he is on it, there's a good return for a young player. 24 Belgian left winger, 23 caps in the Belgian unders setup. So again, he's very much in and around the setup. And I think that injuries aside, he's probably would have burst in to the full squad had that not went that way for him. Now, this season, he's had a mere 18 appearances, 4 goals and 3 assists, 1,244 minutes. But this is the interesting part, Paul. In their version of the SPL split, since coming back from his injury, 10 games and he's 4 goals and 3 assists have came during that period. So he's really been a driving force, a shining light, and returned to the form that, no doubt in my mind, is what made Celtic look at him in the first place. Ticking all the boxes, threat, young, international setup, Champions League experience, Europa League experience. We're talking full campaigns and on the pitch, not sitting on the bench, doing all those things. But you asked about those injuries, and it'd be remiss not to mention it. And this might be the concern, but I want your thoughts on it. Now, this season alone, he's had 3 injuries, ravaged by injuries. The major injury was a torn thigh, which laid him off for 127 days, which equated to 17 games. This is what he's just come back from. But as I say, look at how he's come back. Yeah. The only slight concern, perhaps, is the strains. He's had 2 separate strains as well, 78 days combined in 12 games. So he's been out for a total 29 games in the season across all competitions through various injuries, and one that needed surgical intervention. Now, he is young. He's a high-impact player, a winger, as we say. That might be the concern. How well did these injuries patch up? But when we look previously, he has had similar injuries and a surgery. He had knee surgery in the 2023-24 season that put him out for 10 games in 49 days. And previously to that, in the 22-23 season, he missed another 12 games, and that was a torn thigh. So again, these are recurring injuries in the knee and the thigh, areas that are under high impact when you're that kind of player. But as we see, his numbers over the piece are good, and he's came back, he looks strong, and he's made a contribution. I imagine the injuries, the need to sell the contract is reflected in the price. But again, is this a flip of the coin? Is this a real due diligence situation where you can't run the risk of, say, another Derek Boerichter?
No, we definitely can't. I would say, looking at this one, we have obviously discussed them before. The injuries, I mean, every player gets injuries, every player's had surgeries, every player's had layoffs. Anybody that's not has just, been very, very fortunate. Given how he's come back, as you say, that's a crucial thing for me, how he's come back after that latest injury. Set the header alight by the sounds of it, he's tore it up. So I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the factors that you discussed about them really wanting to kind of clear the decks, as it were, and balance the books. It's one that's persistently been linked with Celtic. I don't think that there'll be too many people that would say, let's not take a risk. I think a lot of people would say he's definitely worth, given his experience, especially in European games and everything else.
Yeah. Here's the thing as well. I think Antwerp, I know bits and bobs. We haven't seen them, played particularly in Europe and things, right? But I would have different concerns if this was, say, an Ange team. And I'll say that it's all about the system you play into. Now, we've criticised at times where Celtic maybe aren't as high impact and high intensity as they were under Ange. Now, if you were putting this guy with those kind of injuries into an Ange team, I might have more concerns. I might have a lot more concerns because of the amount of running, the amount of ground coverage, the high intensity of the press, and as we've seen, lots of injuries to Ange squads. Even at Tottenham right now, summer, it's a different story with Brendan or Brodgeball or whatever you want to call it. At times it can be intense, of course it can be free flowing, it can be fast, but the overall intensity across the board of the game isn't quite there. So does that alleviate some of the maybe concerns about will he stay fit?
I know. I mean, again, that season just passed there. I think we had a couple of layoffs. Obviously, the Jota one is the main kind of takeaway in terms of injuries. I think we've had a lot worse seasons. It really is just your luck. There was a couple of seasons, I think it was the one under Ange where or was it the initial Brendan one where we thought we had some kind of curse? Thought somebody put a voodoo on us with the injuries. It was every week there was somebody else, calling off. That seems to have been up and down. In the last season there, we didn't actually seem to have too really bad. With a couple here and there, James was out for a bit, Jota, and different people will come and go. But given this guy's pedigree, and that's what you're looking at in terms of what he's done, the injuries, I would say it's worth the risk. And if it is that kind of price, then I'm going to say make them an offer, take it or leave it type of offer. I wouldn't get involved in a bidding war and get, if it's the factors that you've discussed about them wanting to get money in.
And I think this is an interesting thing. When we said earlier at the top of the show there about striking early and doing business early, making approach early, this is a guy that's been on our radar for a long, long time. So I would hope that if you are interested and you see this opportunity to get a cut price deal, make it work for you. Now, I'm not trying to sell any of our players, of course I'm not. But Jota being out injured, yes, that could give that wee bit of leverage to them because they know we've got an injury. However, you can still argue the toss and say, well, we've got Maeda, we've got Kuhn, we've got Yang, we've got Forrest, so we're all right. And I think that's important. Kuhn's a guy that, again, gets rumours that might be interested. Now, I certainly don't want to lose him. As I've said before, as much as I don't want to lose him, I felt that he could be replaced. But say he were one who was going to go, I'm just throwing it out there hypothetically, and you're interested in Balikwisha, sign him whilst Kuhn's still there. Sign him, we get a full complement of guys. Don't show any weakness, because as you said, that gives a bit of leverage, and that's when you can get sort of your pants pulled down and pay more for a guy with 1 year in his contract left, them needing to cut the cloth to bring in money. With injury history, that should stack in our favour, and it's time for Celtic to start using that.
Yeah, it is. It's time for us to, I used the term earlier on, I've heard it somewhere, steal a march on your opponents, and that's something that we really need to do this window. If we're going to be serious about really bringing quality in to augment what's already there, which is a quality squad, it's just needing some of the fat trimmed and some players brought in that will just take us on another level. And given his pedigree, I think it's a no-brainer. I would bring him in.
Well, before we finish up, we'll round it up with potentials of what's already there with the squad now. As we know, we sat here and we spoke about taking advantage of sort of cross-border developmental fees. We know we've got young Cummings and the likes. They're getting reported he's signed for West Ham. Happened ages ago. He's another guy that's out the window. We've lost him. But we've also got, I say young, he's 25, but he feels like he's young because he's been there forever and a day, and he's called young Stephen Welsh. Well, young Stephen Welsh, as we know, is out in Michelin, and he's been out there. He's on contract with us until 2027, but reports are now coming out that there's actually a bit of interest in Stevie Welsh. Robbie Keane's Ferencváros, of all teams, have shown their hand and interest in him, as are Michelin, who want to keep hold of him. Now, how do we look at it this season? He's had 17 appearances for Michelin, 1 goal. He's been in and out the squad, but they like enough of what they see. I think it's imperative for him to have a look at what we've got there. Again, if we are getting linked with, again, the young centre back that I just mentioned, potentially others, it's starting to look thin for him to really, really work his way back in here. And I had a look, since the 18-19 season, Paul, when he broke into the team, he's had 68 appearances for Celtic, which doesn't seem like a lot, but you look 18 to 19 season, we're now, getting into 25 to 26 season, and I think it's probably fair to say that he's had enough opportunity to show that he's got something. Are you all for cashing in Stephen Welsh? And more importantly, do you think that Stephen Welsh going away and getting a bit of time with a team in a decent enough league and them showing an interest in what to keep you might just make him take the plunge?
My heart with Stephen Welsh, who's Celtic through and through, my heart wants that romantic notion that, he's went away and get really good experience. He's going to come back in. The reality is, my head then says, he's had a lot of chances and he's not.
And sorry to jump in, Paul, is he any better? Is he any better than Scales, Trusty, or Nawrocki?
No, not for me. And I really wish he was. Because I do know that he is, somebody that really wants to do it for Celtic. But there is his age, there's other factors to take into consideration. The benefit from us in terms of getting a top price for him is the fact that he's 2027, so he's got another 2 years.
25 with 2 years on his contract, mate.
Yeah, so 25-year-old, 2 years in his contract, so we're in a good position in terms of getting maximum return for Stephen.
I mean, realistically, do you think a fee could you command for a Steve Welsh? No disrespect him, like he is, as I say, I'm sure at the right team he'll be a good player, but he's not one of our brightest stars where you can play hardball, is he?
It depends how much another club wants him, really. I don't know what Celtic would value him at.
If you're getting 2 million for Boston Lowell, what are you getting for Steve Welsh?
I would say you're looking at maybe the 3 or 4 million. I don't think it'd be as high as 5, but in the crazy market nowadays, anything's realistically you're looking at a higher price than.
Well, I suppose as well, recency. You've got to look at if you can get 6 million, I believe it was, for Jack Henry when they sold.
Dare I say any more about the craziness of the football market? And it just shows you what could happen. But I think the best option for Stephen is to go away and and build a career elsewhere. If I'm being really honest, we should be looking for a higher level. But I say that with slight regret. I feel as if I'm on an apprentice here. It's with regret. You're out the door, Stephen. But it is a pity because he is a worker. He has put his head in where it hurts on many, many occasions for Celtic. But I just think we need that bit more quality. No,
absolutely. And to finish up, potential returns. We've spoke about Balikwisha, we spoke about the winger, we spoke about the Kuhn situation. Is he going to go? Is he a guy that looked disenfranchised? We saw all this and we thought he came back, then he just fell off the edge of a cliff. I think that the least said about his cup final performance, the better. And then, of course, we've got Yang, can't be depended quite on. We said there, when we talk about Balikwisha, Celtic should sign 1, maybe 2 wingers. But we've got 2 boomerang their way back. Now, we've spoken. I don't want to. I'd hate to be dismissive. I'm fed up talking about Louis Palmer. I'll just lay my cards on the table and say he is not a guy who I think in any way, shape or form can show anything on his hand that says he's going to make it at Celtic. I think very similar to Bernabe, you're trying to offload him and cut your losses. He went to Olympiacos, comes back with a winner's medal. They're no interest in him. He didn't show enough. I think that sums him up. Yeah. So he's a by the by. He is coming back. One person I want to talk about, though, is Marco Tilio. Now, he went out on loans, but came back. In fairness, I'm not an Adonis myself, but he looked a wee bit overweight. He didn't look fit in the times that he got for Celtic. But he's went back out to Melbourne, and it seems it's been a success. He's actually got himself into the Socceroos squad for the next 2 games that they've got coming up. His manager's been in the press singing his praises. And this season, he's had 19 games, 5 goals, 5 assists. Certainly the tail end of that season, he's really sort of kicked on. He's in the press over there talking about how he feels refreshed, how he feels fit, how he feels, he's enjoying his football again, and also that he would like a stab at Celtic. Of course, you'd like a stab at Celtic. 23, mate, still young, plenty of bit of development there. Yeah. On contract to 2028. This is the key point here. Is there a route back for Attilio? Is his pre-season as imperative as Kuhn's was last season?
I'm very upbeat about Tilio. A lot of people will probably put him into a kind of box along with other players and saying, no, we need better. But he's a player that Ange rated very highly, and he's a player that was devastated that he couldn't get that initial run and make his name with Celtic. Everything happens for a reason. Given the numbers that he's produced, I know it's obviously over in another league, but I think get him, give him the pre-season, give him another go. I don't see why not. I don't see why not at all.
I think that's the important thing with Tilio here. Now, again, it's no disrespect to Melbourne City and the A-League, but it's quite clearly a level below the Premier League. You see some of the pitches and it's like playing down the local municipal pitch, right? It's embarrassing at times, but that's it. That's where he's at, and he can only play what's in front of him. And by all accounts, he's doing well enough. So much so that he's into the Socceroos national squad, right? So you've got to give him credit where that's due. I do think that pre-season is imperative for him at Celtic. There on day one, I think the fitness, that's going to be the telling bit. He could be playing every single day, twice a week over in the A-League, but the intensity, the sharpness, the competitiveness won't be there. He'll still come back not at peak Celtic level. So I think he's a guy, particularly with, at the moment, the injury to Jota, the pre-season games, that schedule, you need to be playing him as much as you possibly can. You need to be given an opportunity to build up that fitness. But as we say, look at Yang. I know I've flipped and flopped, as have you and the other guys on the show, about Yang. I'm still not settled on him. If he hadn't had that purple patch, if he hadn't had that great period after what I saw after it when he came back in the final, I would have said in the bin.
Yeah.
I think he's a guy that needs a bit of development, maybe a loan perhaps, but looking at Yang, just as an example, when he had that purple patch, is proof that with the right application, with the right attitude, you can feature. The difference between Yang and Tilio is I think Tilio, at least on face value, looks like a far more rounded and accomplished player for where he is as a young player at the moment in time. And if Celtic can harness that, I think he could potentially overtake Yang in the pecking order and at least give us an option, mate.
It is, and it really is an area of the park where we will want to add options. We have flipped and flopped, as you say, during the season with Yang, and as you say, I have to agree with everything you've said there, mate, nail on the head. If he hadn't had that wee, part of the season where he was really encouraging and committing his man, that's something that we just seem to have come away from now. Wingers that just want to cut in. I want to see wingers going by their man, byline, really ripping it up and tearing their, the back line that they're facing to bits. Maybe a wee trick or a wee something else.
And that's the thing. Looking at him again, videos are great and highlight reels are great. But anything that I have seen of him, and again I know, and a caveat that way, is playing maybe at Scottish Championship level, right? But that's what he's doing. He's picking the ball up. He's direct. See, when we think of all the impetus that James Forrest gave us, particularly when I look at that diabolical cup final, when he came on, he was so direct. It was just pick up the ball, run, commit, take on a man. And as soon as he was injured, you knew that was all she wrote. Now, again, I know I'm maybe rewriting history here, but just as a hypothetical, Tilio is doing with the James Forrest stuff at a slightly lower level. And if you can nurture that, get him fit and bring that out, wouldn't it be great to have a potentially younger version of the original James Forrest, that traditional winger style play, none of this cutting in stuff, just dare say, even Paddy McCourt-esque, I'm taking you on. I think there's a place for that, mate. I really do.
Love to see, as I say, I repeat myself, but I love to see a winger with a head up, something that James has given us since day one, head up and going round and beating his man with the feet, with the ball almost glued to his feet, to use a phrase. There could be a surprise package with Tilio. We'll know soon enough, when the season, unfolds, and we'll see where he is. If Rodgers has got a good kind of pedigree himself of working with wingers and really wanting to develop wingers. So I think it will be a good one.
And to close on that, that's the important thing for me. We've spoke about trimming the fat. There's a lot of guys that we should hopefully be offloading and getting away, right? But see, when we looked at the squad, we knew it was thin on options. Undoubtedly, I think we need to add at least 4 quality players. That's the key. Quality players. At least tried and tested, dependable, quality players. That's what we need. I still think that as much as I've had reservations, I can understand the likes of a signing, I say, Schlupp as a utility player with that experience, if the price is right. I get that. I'm also a big advocate and a big fan of going and getting somebody as a collar running bill. I've said this before, and I'm just throwing it out there. I don't think it's going to happen, but the likes of an Ndidi, you go and get a guy like that, you know what you're paying. You'll pay your 8 million, whatever it is. You're not going to get a great sale on him, but your money is paid for by what he brings to the team. Celtic need a good combination of experience and youth, but also, instead of having a bloated bench with just the scraps that we had like this season, I would rather have someone like Tillio on the bench than a second or third goalie or a random defender that's never going to make the pitch, or certainly if you're in a sticky point, provide you with any sort of threat or risk. I'd rather that.
You want a player with a bit of hunger that's got a point to prove, and that Tillio ticks all that box. You've even got the likes of this notion about Giakoumakis, who's declared himself, available. Should that happen, you've got a player there that knows what the SPL is all about, knows what Celtic's all about, and by all accounts regrets, what's happened in the past and wants to work his way back in. Whether that would happen, that's all again all hypothetical, no doubt.
Yeah, of course it is.
Papers will have a look at that.
But anyway, Paul, thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for tuning the fat over, as we say, the initial first week of rumours that are out there. I'm sure that come the turn of the week, later on today, we'll have the rest of the rumours will start up and so on and so forth. And of course, it would be remiss for us to not mention, just in passing, the big challenge that's come over for good old Govan. That's it. The Americans have landed. They're apparently going to make Rangers great again. And of course, I'm just going to say it. We were laughed at. But we were told that we were the typical green, unwashed accountants when we put out our thoughts on the takeover, the revolution. And I said on a very lengthy, but I guess instructive and informed post, that I says initial investment will be there, but it will be a sensible amount. I get laughed at, and it's 20 million, and it's not even 20 million out of their own pockets. 20 million going to those fans and saying, roll up, buy your shares so we can generate 20 million. Aye. Underwhelming.
If you're a fan, you're thinking that there's going to be a lot more money coming from an American, consortium. £20 million is really just maybe a down payment and a kind of wait and see what happens with this, kind of scenario. But all I'm concerned about is the fact that the timing of that actually in some ways is beneficial, because we have just had this the great season, we've won a double, right? Let's put that where it should be. But there has just been this wee bit of a kind of transition with the squad. So that happening, I think, just keeps us agile. Dermot, and everybody else at the club just pressing the button to keep it going.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think regardless, we don't get distracted by the neighbours, but as I always say, you have to keep one eye on what's going over there. There's no doubt in my mind that whether you think they're great, you think they're terrible, or anything else in between, they can only get better. And I genuinely think, as much as our fans don't want to mention it, they don't want to give it the breath or the time of day, these are guys who are coming in with decent business acumen. And as we know from the American investors of teams down south and the likes, they are very business driven, they're very focused, and they will, over time, of course, make them get better. Celtic find themselves in a massive position where resources are outstripping them. It's important for us to, first and foremost, make that Champions League, make that leap, get that additional revenue cemented straight in. There's a chance that they might make it, they might not, but either way, we've got to focus on getting that. And with the resources we've got, we can't stand still. That's the thing, because yes, I know it's in isolation, but the head-to-heads against Rangers last season were not great, and it gave you a lot of food for thought, as did that cup final. There's work to be done, there's improvements to be made, and I'll say it once, I'll say it twice, and I'll say it again before we finish. This summer is imperative that Celtic get this one right, mate.
Huge. As you said, mate, you can't gloss over it as much as we laugh and everything else. The results against the Rangers last season were unacceptable. The style of play was unacceptable. The application was unacceptable. We played great in other games. We played very well in Europe. We had a great season by all, when you look at the figures and you look at the revenue and you look at the trophies. But there has to be an improvement against your rivals.
And that's the thing. There's always stats, results, trophies. Yep, that's all that matters. But there's something to be said about the eye test, and that's what we're looking for. There's something, but you see with your eyes, and yep, you'll get there. But as much as I'd snap your hand off right now for another double, I would like to do that if it was going to be a double. But I'd like to do it with a wee bit more style than last season.
A bit more panache, a bit more muscle.
Lennon singing pizzazz.
Yeah. We're too nice a team. We need to toughen up. We need to get numbers in, and we need to become a winning machine. That's that we are, and just keep that going.
Well, anyway, Paul, thank you for your time. Let everybody crack on, and thank to yourself for joining us. Who says whether you're watching us as it was uploaded, whether you're catching up, thank you very much. Continue to support the channel. Hit that subscribe button, like, share, tell your friends, tell your family, your friends' friends, and all that. It's going to be a busy summer in Celtic World Order. We'll be here all through the summer to cover all the rumours, all the movement, and a couple of wee extra things in between. So until the next time, you take care of yourself, and as always, hail, hail. Thank you very much, Paul. We'll see you later.
Cheers, hail, hail.